If you lead a team that went through a layoff, a death, a public crisis, or any major loss, this is for you. For some of your people, there may be predictable times each year when things get harder. And leaders often treat those weeks as random performance problem. If you don't understand anniversary reactions, you can lose great people during the period when they most need steady leadership. The big problem is this: leaders often don't realize that trauma anniversaries can increase distress and reduce functioning during that anniversary window. You see someone who was fine last month suddenly withdrawn or irritable or unable to focus and assume it's a motivation issue. For some people, it certainly could be, but for others, it's not. Their nervous system can react to the time of year, even if they aren't consciously focused on the date. If you don't know me, my name is Manya Chylinski. I survived the Boston Marathon bombing. I gave a TEDx talk called Making Invisible Trauma Visible, a Survivor's Story. And I supported advocacy efforts around federal legislation, including the Post Disaster Mental Health Response Act, which focused on expanding access to crisis counseling after disasters. All of it started because my own city treated my trauma like it didn't count, since I walked away without a visible injury. Here are 3 things you need to know about anniversary reactions. Number 1, your body can react to the date or season without you consciously thinking about it. People can feel dread and sadness or numbness in the days and weeks before the anniversary. This is biology, it isn't a weakness. Your nervous system can learn that this time of year equals danger, and it can respond with fight, flight, or freeze, even when the mind says, I'm fine. When stress rises, things like thinking and social skills get worse, memory gets worse, impulse control can weaken, and it can be harder to interpret social cues. That can show up at work as lower productivity or conflict or withdrawal. Number 2, anniversaries are not only about memory. They're also about threat detection. Trauma can shift how people scan for danger. And when time linked cues appear, our threat system can dominate. So that could be the date on the calendar, the season, a news story, an email from leadership, even the weather. These cues can reactivate the stress response. And in the workplace, this can mean more misinterpretations, lower tolerance for ambiguity, and small stressors can feel existential. And third, the workplace adds a multiplier. Public anniversaries trigger things like media cycles, leadership posts, minutes of silence, remembrance events. These may be supportive for some people, and they can be activating or punishing for others. Well-intentioned remembrance can become an organizationally sanctioned trigger. Layoffs can create a similar anniversary problem, especially when people experience betrayal or rupture of their identity or survivor guilt or fear. Hey everyone, thanks for checking out my video. If you want to learn more about building a trauma-informed workplace or how survivors show up in the world and how you can support them, check out my newsletter down below. Sign up. And while you're down there, I'd love it if you click the thumbs up button to show how much you appreciated this video. Thanks so much. The anniversary isn't only about the past. It's whether or not your system feels safe now. Let me show you what this can look like in a team so you can diagnose it fast. You might see unusual sick days, tardiness, camera off behavior, short fuses, tone policing, defensiveness, decision paralysis, perfectionism, risk aversion, or risk taking. Both of those things can happen. People say, I can't focus, or they complain that they can't sleep. You hear somebody say, I'm done with this place. Don't assume that these are motivation problems. For some people, they can be stress response patterns showing up at work. And here's what leaders often miss. Not only direct victims of an event can be affected, witnesses can be affected, family members, responders, people in the same community or workplace, people with similar past experiences, they can be affected because the event rhymes with their own history. People harmed by organizational decisions adjacent to the event can be affected. This is why it's important that you don't assume who is allowed to feel impacted. Right now, We're at the 1 year mark of the January 2025 Los Angeles fires. The Palisades and Eaton fires started on January 7th. They were fully contained on January 31st. And there was significant loss of life and structures. If you have team members in that region, they may be struggling right now, and they might not tell you because they don't think it counts, or because they think you're going to judge them, or because your culture doesn't make space for it. Here's what you need to do: build a sensitive dates map, a private leadership-only calendar of major organizational events, layoffs, closures, PR crises, deaths of team members, community disasters that affected your workforce, industry-wide shocks. Then treat them like any operational risk. Plan capacity and communications. Plan for an anniversary window, not just the day. For some people, that ramp up to the day is the hardest part. So, in that time period, reduce high stakes deadlines in that window if you can. Avoid surprise performance reviews. Increase manager check ins. And pre brief your managers with a short script and boundaries. The goal is not to get people to disclose to you their stories or how they're feeling. The goal is to provide people with safety and options. Here's a script your managers can use. This time of year can be heavy for some people for many different reasons. If you want adjustments, tell me what would help. And if you don't, that's fine too. Or this one: I want to be helpful and I may not know the right thing to say. If I get it wrong, let me know and I'll correct it quickly. Now let's talk about communication strategies around sensitive dates. Offer options. Don't prescribe feelings. So you want to say something like, people may notice this week is harder. And avoid we all remember or we will never forget. Don't demand visibility. Join the remembrance session can feel like coerced participation for someone who doesn't want to join. Use inclusive language, something like, people can be affected in different ways, directly, indirectly, or not at all. Avoid universalizing any rituals you create. A moment of silence, that's not neutral for everyone. And you're probably going to make a mistake. And when you do, repair it quickly. Just say something like, I realize that may not have landed. I'm sorry. I'm going to adjust. And here's something that might surprise you if you've never experienced something like this. Some people are trying to forget. They don't want to have constant reminders. And that is valid because forgetting can be one way that somebody functions. Never forget framing can feel to them like a moral test and pressure to perform grief on a schedule. That is not trauma-informed leadership. It's compliance in disguise. So what rituals actually do help? Think about choice architecture. Optional spaces to reflect, no cameras required. A private channel for resources and support options. Values-based action like a donation match or opt-in volunteer hours. And you might think about collecting stories. If the affected people want to share their stories, never force them to tell their stories or extract them. Avoid mandatory remembrance events and graphic retelling. Not everybody wants to hear those. And avoid surprise guest speakers. And please avoid never forget framing as a moral test. Now let's talk about supporting employees through anniversary grief. You are not a therapist, and you don't need to be. But here's what you can do: flexible scheduling, workload adjustments, permission to step out of meetings. You can temporarily reduce exposure to things like frontline customer work or media monitoring or crisis on call. Do remind people of your EAP and outside resources. Just don't push it onto them. These are practical supports that are within your scope as a leader. Here's a simple playbook to follow. 30 days before the anniversary, identify that sensitive window, adjust deadlines and staffing, prepare those manager scripts, publish optional resources. 7 days before, normalize the variability in people's feelings. Say impacts differ widely. Offer practical accommodations and do so privately. And remind managers, their job is not to probe for stories or information. Their job is not to diagnose. During that anniversary window, keep communications minimal and choice-based. Watch for conflict and fatigue. Give permission for reduced output without calling people out publicly. And then after the anniversary, don't force closure. Think about what worked this year and ask people what operational changes would reduce stress next year. Most leaders want to help. They're trying to help people cope. The real leverage is to stop manufacturing those triggers. Public commemoration posts, never forget statements, company wide reflection moments, narrative resets like we came back stronger. These can center the institution's identity needs over the individual's nervous systems. Forced membership, not leadership, it's branding. Anniversary dips are not a culture problem. They're a predictable load pattern for some teams in some seasons. If you treat it like a moral failure, you compound harm and you can lose talent. If I could tell leaders one thing about anniversary reactions that would make them completely rethink how they handle sensitive dates, it would be this. This is what I want you to remember. Trauma anniversaries can increase distress and reduce functioning for some people. Your job is not to fix people. Your job is to stop re-traumatizing them and create a system where they can function even when their nervous system is on high alert. What's one sensitive date that your team is approaching? Watch the next video on this topic to learn how to build a trauma-informed culture that doesn't require people to perform grief on schedule.